The scripture this morning is from Matthew 7, verses 1 through 6, and then some from John 8, 11 through 31 through 32, John 8, 44 through 45. We're going to continue this sermon series on prayer, and today we're focusing on the prayer to be delivered from evil. Not a lighthearted thing. Pray for me as I pray it or share it with you. But let's listen for God's word. Jesus said, "Do not judge, so that you may not be judged. For with the judgment you make, you will be judged, and the measure you give will be the measure you get. Why do you see the speck in your neighbor's eye, but do not notice the log in your own eye? Or how can you say to your neighbor, 'Let me take the speck out of your eye,' while the log is in your own eye? You hypocrite. First, take the log out of your own eye, and then you'll see clearly to take the speck out of your neighbor's eye. Do not give what is holy to dogs, and do not throw your pearls before swine, or they will trample them underfoot and turn and maul you." Jesus said in John 8, "If you continue in my word, then you're my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free." Saying to the Pharisees in that same chapter, Jesus said, "You are from your father the devil, and you choose to do your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks according to his own nature. For he is a liar, and he is the father of lies. But because I tell the truth, you don't believe me." May God bless our understanding of the word. I heard a little story that's connected to all this that I thought I would start with. There was a man named John, a young guy, that invited his mother over to dinner to his apartment to have dinner with him and his roommate, Susan. His mother came over, and his mother had met Susan once before, and Susan was a very, very attractive young woman. And they had dinner, and she noticed the interaction between her son and Susan, and she thought, I think they're more than friends. And she was kind of putting that together, but John insisted they were just friends, and he could tell his mom was wondering about it, so he said, "Mom, I'm telling you, we're just friends, So his mother said, "Well, okay," and she went home. About a week later, Susan came to John and said, "I have not seen that silver soup spoon since the evening that your mom was over. You don't think your mom would have done something with that, did she?" And so John sent his mother an email. He said, "I'm not saying, Mom, that you took the spoon or not, but we haven't seen it since you were here. Do you have any idea where it is?" And so his mom then sent him an email back and said, "I'm not sure that you and Susan are sleeping with each other or not. But if she were not in your bed, she would have found the label in hers by now." Truth. It's real weird to tell a story like that and see nothing on the screen, but I'm trusting that you got an appropriate kick out of that. I thought it was funny. We're really focusing today on what Jesus might have meant when he said in that prayer that we pray every week, "Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil." Every week, we ask God to deliver us from evil. To be honest, it's not something that I have spent a lot of time throughout my Christian journey focusing on. It's actually one of those things I don't want to make any larger than it needs to be, and it's confusing, and I have heard what for me are too many unattractive, unbelievable, trivializing depictions of evil, or else manipulative and something that just feels off, and so you don't quite know what to do with it. So I'm right there with you if you've felt that way. Or maybe you've been a part of a church tradition that has thrown it at you in a way that was too heavy and too manipulative and dark. And yet there it is every week in that prayer. And to be honest, I have been thinking a lot about evil lately. Because without wanting to sound overly dramatic, and certainly not overly negative or gloom and doom, but I have been, I'll just put it this way, feeling evil in the air. I think we're in a time in history where there is great darkness. And by the way, we need to even look at our language around dark and light because of the connection between racism historically and darkness being bad. But we'll save that for another message, okay? The powers of darkness, as scriptures often refer to evil. So what is evil? Well, there is a difference between sin and evil. We all sin. From the beginning, though, and sin, what is sin? Well, I have told you many times that the Greek term hamartia is actually an archery term, and it means missing the mark. So sin, it's not necessarily some big moral evil or something, but sin is whatever causes us to miss the mark of living out and receiving and embodying the love and kindness and compassion and justice of God. Could be any number of things, and it's personal, could be social. What causes us to, and we all do it. We're all imperfect, okay? Sin and evil are different, though. In the beginning, though, what sin does, it gives us a clue to where evil starts to kick in. Right in the outset in the garden, after the woman and the man together, they both ate the apple, by the way. Their response, though, was to have their eyes opened to their own nakedness. Shame came into being, and they hid from God. So anything that causes us to hide, to cover up the truth, that should be a bit of an alarm clock, a bell, rather, that somehow goes off and says, be careful now. You're hiding. You're covering up. You're pretending. We can hide from ourselves to an amazing degree. That might be ultimately the most destructive, not being willing to be honest with ourselves, and that's where we're going to go in a few moments. We can hide from each other. We can hide from God, but it's silly, isn't it? I always love that God came to the garden and said, Adam, where are you? As if God did not know. We can't hide from God. Silly to try. And before we get into this any further, I just want to say, I believe firmly that God has no agenda or desire to expose people in a humiliating way. It's not about that. The only time that being exposed in a humiliating way might be part of somehow the unfolding of God's process is when we get stubborn and arrogant and think we can get away with stuff and push back. Then maybe we need to be confronted at that point and exposed. But I don't think God is looking for reasons to humiliate anybody. God just wants us to come home to the truth, to be who we truly are. And to know that who we truly are, even with all of our imperfections, is beautiful and lovable, and it doesn't need to be covered up. Evil, then, is something else. And in this deeper dive I'm taking now, and we're just going to scratch the surface today, but deeper dive into evil, I've been trying to find the best theologians and psychiatrists that I trust who have written about this subject and study some of what they've said. So I returned to a book I read a long time ago by the well-known author Scott Peck. It's called People of the Lie. And he says this by way of trying to define evil. He says, in our hearts, I think we all have some understanding of the nature of evil. For the moment, I can do no better than to heed my son, who, with the characteristic vision of 8-year-olds, explained simply to me one day, hey, Daddy, you know, evil is live spelled backward. Evil is in opposition to life. It is that which opposes the life force. It has, in short, to do with the killing force. Specifically, it has to do with murder, namely unnecessary killing and unnecessary death. Evil, then, for the moment, is that force residing either inside or outside of human beings that seeks to kill life or liveliness. My definition, much more simply, is that evil is the ongoing willful suppression of truth for the purpose of self-centered gain at the deliberate expense of others. I'll say that again. Evil is the ongoing willful suppression of truth for the purpose of self-centered gain at the deliberate expense of others. It has struck me as I've been working with this that in many ways, following Jesus really comes down to choosing truth versus falsehood or lying. If you want to be a mature child of God, the single most important thing we can do is be radically committed to the truth, to seeking truth, to telling truth, to standing for truth. And conversely, the power of evil in the biblical sense will be about what's done when truth is denied, distorted, disregarded. And the power of evil can be found in its most destructive and focused manifestations, in and through those who are willing not just to tell a lie now and then, but embrace lying and deception as a strategy for getting what they want for themselves, no matter what it costs others. Today, all we're going to do is take a look at Jesus' most powerful teaching that guards us as individuals and as groups against the seductive power of evil. He referred to Satan as the father of lies. He referred to himself in John 14:6 as the truth. What following Jesus is all about is choosing with God's help to let go of what's false and to come home. I keep saying that, but I mean it. It's home. It's who we truly are. It's what reality truly is, to come home to the truth. So in Matthew 7, as we read, Jesus says this: don't judge. The Greek word for judge implies this: don't go around always sizing everyone else and everything else outside you up. Comparing, analyzing, evaluating from your small, ego-centered position. You know, when you think about it, that's the default setting of the ego, isn't it? Do I like him? Do I like them? Is she better looking than I am? Wish I had that car. He bugs me. I don't like her. She's a ditz. I'd look good if I were with him. So step one against evil is don't make your way through life constantly sizing up everyone else or yourself. And the truth is that if you move through life like that, judging others constantly, you'll do it to yourself as well. And vice versa. Instead, I would suggest let's be the people that go around life trying to catch somebody doing something right. Trying to notice what's good and beautiful about someone. Trying to call forth each other's gifts. But Jesus, getting back to our teaching, says, don't judge. And then he gives us the most powerful practice for preventing evil from getting a grip on our lives. He says, don't worry about the specks in the eyes of other people. First, take a look at the log in your own eyes. Deal with that yourself first. And then maybe with God's help, you'll see clearly enough to really be part of the solution in helping someone or something else out. This is hard, isn't it? To be willing, when we're tempted to get all involved in what we think about somebody else, to say, wait a sec, what about me? I've mentioned several times what was a life-changing statement from a pastor I worked with when I was in seminary, and I made a mistake that was stupid on my part. And his response was, if I were perfect, I'd be really mad at you. But I'm not, so let's talk. Jesus is telling us that if we'll do this one thing, look first at ourselves and ask ourselves all the hard questions, not to beat ourselves up or to put ourselves down, but just so that we'll be free enough to bring an honest, open-hearted, open-minded being to a conversation or an interaction or an action for justice. And this works on an individual level, it works on a group level, and it guards us from one of the first and ultimately most dangerous and destructive things that we do when evil's getting a hold of us, and that is to deflect or project. Deflection. The best defense is a good offense. You point out some problem of mine, and I say, yeah, well, what about this you do? And projection is what happens when we don't look inside. We find all the problems out there in somebody else, and that's what fuels the scapegoat mechanism and leads to unspeakable disasters in history. The most horrible things that have happened have been about scapegoating someone. Hitler with the Jews. They thought they had a Jewish problem that would be solved by getting rid of the Jews. So anytime we hear a leader pointing to someone else as the problem, we should be careful. This has a lot of practical applications in our life, and I see that I'm about to violate my own make it shorter than longer commitment. So let's just state the obvious. It'll change your relationships with the people that you live with and spend the most time with if instead of blaming and pointing a finger, you're looking at yourself. Starting there. Changes the energy of conversations. Scott Peck talks about the danger of what he calls the pretense of love. How so much of what we do, even in the name of love and light, is just an image we want to project and not necessarily the reality of who we are. Evil loves to hide behind light workers, ministers, priests. You fill in the blanks. And I had a lot more individual explanations, but I want to get toward the end. Part of why this is so important is because it will change the way we go about doing what we do, especially the good things. I don't know about you, but I am tired of a political discourse that's nothing other than two people yelling at each other, pointing out each other's flaws. Even when you're right, it doesn't get us where we need to go. We can't really have the conversations that could really lead to solving problems that must be addressed. Climate change. You know what's been evil when it comes to climate change? For decades, we have been lying to ourselves as a people. For decades, we have been obfuscating or sidestepping or even hiring scientists to say what we want to say in order to protect a particular point of view. What we need is to be truthful, even if the truth is horrifyingly difficult to embrace. Immigration. We've not allowed ourselves to really hear why people are fleeing desperate situations, running for their lives, coming to our country looking for help. And we've lied about who they are and why they're here. Well, this is challenging stuff. To look at ourselves and to own the ways in which we're not being truthful. But our agenda as Christians is to be instruments of God's love and healing and kindness and compassion and justice, and to be radically truthful about all of it. We can't do this perfectly. We won't do it perfectly. And just this week, as I was praying about this, I realized something that didn't surprise me. But anybody who is going to truthfully, honestly pray, God, show me where I need some work, is going to start seeing things that you might not want to see. That was certainly the case for me. All of a sudden, I saw all these ways in which I've been less than fully honest. Not deliberately, at least usually not. But this is all of us. This is the journey into truth that's at the heart of following Jesus. But what I also felt, as I started to get more and more overwhelmed with some of my own growing edges in this, I felt God smiling and saying something like, and this is just my paraphrasing of what I feel in my being, something along the lines of, you're really serious about this, aren't you? Do you have any idea how much that delights me? You really want to be shown your own blind spots? And my response was, yeah. I want to be free. I want to be free so that I can truly offer something worth offering in this world and enjoy life too. In closing, let's get clear. Evil is the exact opposite of being willing to own your own stuff. And Jesus ended his teaching in that scripture by telling us there will be people in this world who cannot and will not ever acknowledge a mistake, let alone apologize, let alone make things right. He was very realistic about the simple fact that there are plenty of such people in the world, and many of them are leaders in the world. They lack all humility and empathy. They're extremely ruthless and cruel and cunning and manipulative. They will do anything to maintain power and control. They lie so much that they don't even know they're lying. They probably believe their own lies. That's why Scott Peck called his book People of the Lie. They should not be entrusted with the power to do great harm. They will, as Jesus put it, trample on the best you have to offer. And they will stomp on what's most precious. And then they will turn and attack you and destroy you if they can. And they will blame you for it, saying that they are justified and you deserved it, and claim that they're doing the will of God in the process. Jesus was not the least bit naive about the existence of such people, and he confronted them and called them out. And so, as we lean into this political process, and I gotta stop, you know what the Christ-centered question for us to be asking ourselves is as we plan our vote? Who is most likely to be telling the truth? Who is most likely to cover up or distort or use disinformation to deliberately misrepresent truth for their own self-centered gain, regardless of who pays the price? Those are the kinds of questions that we should be asking if we want to use our vote and our influence in the world to support the love and truth and kindness and justice at the heart of the gospel. And I will say, God knows everybody from any party and every position is capable of misrepresenting things. That's not a partisan statement. But we need to do our best. I have to leave it there. Lots to think about. It always starts by looking here. If we do that, we'll never be in the grips of evil.